accidents, suicides, murders, domestic violence, and immortality. And there was also some front line that named cannabis as grass with weeds in hell. That was all going to 1937 Marijuana Tax Act. It was created by Henry Anslinger and U.S. Treasury Department's Federal Bureau of Narcotics said this was only 3 months after Henry Anslinger made alcohol legal, and his Federal Bureau for alcohol was on its way to be closed. Who helped this conquistador of marijuana? His finance help came from DuPont Corporation and William Randolph Hearst Media, some great media magnate in that time, gave him media coverage. In 1941, cannabis was removed from pharmacotherapy and the U.S. list of drugs. Lawyer W.C. Woodward disputes his claims about crime caused with marijuana effect, and there was some big dispute in Congress, which was very well provoked for negative aspects of cannabis, as they called it. Senator John Digel was talking in Congress about cannabis, and he told, "We know that it is a habit that is spreading, particularly among youngsters. We learn that from the pages of newspapers. The numbers of victims is increasing each year." And Henry Anslinger came to Congress and said, "Juvenile addict killed his family in Florida. Boy smoked marijuana, he didn't remember his crime. He killed his father, mother, 2 brothers and sisters with an axe. Marijuana is shortcut to asylum. You need to smoke it just for a month and your brain becomes nightmare warehouse." So when you see these ridiculous accusations, you know that they have some personal issues or some interest issues about cannabis. And the New York major Fiorello LaGuardia was only higher politician that orders study about cannabis. And this science study concluded that there is no evidence that marijuana creates crimes, aggressive behavior, sexual delicts, persona alterations, or organism immunity. It is 1 or 2 rankings weaker than alcohol, cigarettes, or gambling. Of course, FDA and FBN dismissed study as harmful. Only 3 years later, in 1948, there was advice for legislative from Congress, and they created prohibition of marijuana in U.S. Congress also approved criminal investigations in 1951, and which is really intriguing. After the Second World War, Anslinger changes his opinion about this harmful, this violent drug, and recalled the plant as a drug that creates pacifists in the middle of communist threat. So you see that this is maybe pretty insane. What is the situation today? Well, in 1970, after DLC, the company created study for military. Military ordered study because of findings maybe 25 years ago that marijuana was a highly violent drug, and they want to spread it over the Vietnam. Of course, there were no positive results. The main topic is violence and delicts, and they refused to use cannabis. In 1970, there were 2 major laws against cannabis. First was Comprehensive Drug Abuse Prevention and Control Act, and second is Controlled Substances Act. It creates classes of prohibited drugs, and in first class were drugs which destroyed organism and the psyche of the consumer. Of course, in this first class there were cocaine, heroin, and cannabis. And in the 4th class, which is pretty much lower than the first class, there were pentazocine. That in first year there were hundreds of people died from side effects. So you see this craziness of legislation. Cannabis until that day was without lethal case or physical addiction. In 1976, there were first compassionate investigation of new drug program patients, and his name was Robert Randall. 2 years later, New Mexico became first state of medical cannabis. In next 8 years, until 1986, there were 250 cured people with natural THC, and all the 3 side effects reported. In 1985, natural cannabis stayed in the first class, but synthetic THC is now second class. And it was also, I think that this was the first time that the media changed sides, and I think that they were proclaiming in some kind of way cannabis. And a major case in that time was case of Lynn Pearson. Cannabis is relaxation from hard chemotherapy for her, and she died without legal dose of cannabis in that pretty extended part of her illness. She was drawn down to the court, and all media coverage showed her sick in the court, but they didn't give her cannabis treatment. In 1988, Francis L. Young, judge, stated that natural cannabis is one of the safest therapeutic active substances known to man. 1990, married couple Jenkins, that were suffering from AIDS, goes 5 years in prison for 2 cannabis talks, and after media pressure, they let them go. The tragic part is that they died a few years ago. George Bush Sr. was last big opponent of medical cannabis, and after him, I think that even politicians on the higher places in the US government talk positive for cannabis treatments. Raphael Mechoulam in Israel, 1964, stated that the main problem of science studies isn't the absence of activity, but too much of potential benefits of cannabis. And then came legalization wave of medical cannabis in the whole world. We now see that there is total legalization in Ecuador, medical liberalization in Israel, Czech Republic, Poland, liberalization in Spain, Portugal, Great Britain, Romania, and some federal states in USA and Canada. In this region, especially in Croatia, there is decriminalization going on. In Slovenia, I think that you have some medical liberalization activity, and in other countries there is no liberalization, legalization, or even decriminalization. So it is a pretty tough situation, and we are fighting for some major changes. And last part of this lecture is cannabis usage as cure. I think that most famous is usage in chemotherapy, where it's destroying tissue, 88% of singular studies. And we can say with this that chemotherapy is a really big problem in all the situation. We cures this sickness with antiemetics, which is also really harmful substances. And in 1988, there was a huge cannabis study in Israel, where 72% of patients lost nausea. Smoking before chemotherapy also mentally disburden person, so it can be used in that kind of way. Hundreds of records, patients stopped smoking after, so it wasn't addictive. But there is problem with in USA because there is this partnership for Drug Free America that is in great conflict of interest. because there is corporate lobby in the board, and these corporate pharmaceutical people are lobbying against cannabis as medical treatment. There is also some good examples in the glaucoma treatment, whereas glaucoma is pressure disorder in eye, and it's the second cause of blindness after retinal degeneration. Pharmaceutical companies use xylitol to reduce intraocular pressure, but the USLA study showed that cannabis has the same characteristics. So if you use THC in eye drops, you can do a pretty good job. Robert Randall, that first eye and the patient that we talk about, scientifically proved that it is cure on the court, and it is used as cure today. There's also some great benefits in treatment of epilepsy, which is discharge of brain cells in an uncontrolled way, which causes muscle convulsion. We use the cocktail of drugs to battle against it, but cannabis was used as cure from antiquity. Patients are same or better without deterioration of their state. In 1975, there was a study which confronts placebo of cannabis, and cannabis was presented as a great supplement for drugs. So in USA, I think the situation is that association of epilepsy patients win lawsuits and they can use cannabis. Multiple sclerosis, autoimmune disease in which someone's immune system attacks fans of nerve fibers. Patients use corticosteroids and drugs for convulsions. They just decelerate disease, don't cure it. Cannabis treatment was a matter of study in Journal of Neurology in 1989. Shivering is reducing. It was scientifically proved, and cannabis helps on bladder control, which is also big importance for patients. And even the most stubborn doctors give the treatment with cannabis. Greg Polfer, Valley Medic, after incredible recovery with cannabis smoking, creates famous speech about cannabis, and he told that I don't like breaking the law and giving large amounts of money to drug dealers, but like walking, speaking, reading, writing, and see things. Treatment of paraplegia and quadriplegia, which is a weakness of paralyzed muscles, body convulsion, which is really well known at war veterans circles, and they use smoking of cannabis. This study shows that it ends convulsions, creates better erection, relaxation, it's good antidepressant, good for appetite, and without side effects of disease. And over 70% of all world patients smoking cannabis. And there are some also, there is huge amount of sicknesses that it can be really good cure, but most famous examples are also chronic pain, where we use opioids, analgesics. But Iowa University in 1999 showed that THC is great painkiller, and IND programs have high score passes, especially in chronic pain. It was also used as cure against migraine a few thousand years ago, and THC proved that it inhibits delivery of serotonin in blood during seizure. It is also very well known in PTSD insomnia circles. Of course, cannabis isn't always the great cure for all diseases. It has its own negative aspects, but I think that these negative aspects are not so great problems. We can talk about visibility of high state when you smoke weed, about law prohibition and jail, and about urine control at work. So it could be a problem, and some more visible problems are lethargy, apathy, and lack of ambition. But I think that this system is fighting against it because it destroys social norms because of its problem removal and a social effect. So when you smoke cannabis, you are not a good worker and you are not a good listener. I hope that you listen that all this what I was talking about, and thank you for coming. I hope you will enjoy this WHC conference, and we'll see each other next year. Keep calm and smoke weed every day.